There's a line in your life, an invisible threshold, and everything you accept, everything you tolerate, everything you settle for exists beneath that line. That line is your standard, not what you hope for, not what you talk about, what you accept, what you consistently allow, what you repeatedly do, even when it's hard. If you've ever wondered why certain things keep repeating in your life, why you get close to success and then slide back, why some habits never seem to stick, why the same kind of people or circumstances seem to follow you, the answer is almost always this: your standards haven't changed. People say they want more. They say they want to change, but they don't raise their standards, and until they do, nothing shifts. You don't get what you want, you get what you tolerate. You don't get what you dream about, you get what your standards demand. It's easy to have high hopes. It's easy to write down goals. It's easy to talk about big plans, but until your standards shift, until the way you operate at your core changes, those goals stay dreams. The results stay inconsistent. The transformation stays out of reach. You can see it everywhere. Two people go through the same situation, face the same obstacles, start with the same tools, but one of them rises, the other doesn't. One of them grows, the other repeats. One of them breaks through, the other gives up. What's the difference? The difference is standards. One person has trained themselves to expect more, to do more, to demand more from themselves, not occasionally, but consistently. They hold themselves to a level that others only talk about, and because of that, they create different results, not just once, but over and over again. Your standards are not set. By what you say, they're revealed. By what you do when it's uncomfortable, when it's inconvenient, when no one is watching. That's when your true standard shows up. That's where change actually happens. And here's the good news. Standards are not fixed. They're not written in stone. They're not locked into your DNA. You can raise them. You can change them. You can decide right now that what you've accepted in the past is no longer acceptable, that who you've been is not who you're going to be, that what you've tolerated ends here. And once you make that decision, once you truly raise your standard and begin to live at that level, everything begins to shift. Your habits change, your energy changes, your relationships, your confidence, your results. Everything starts to reflect your new standard because you don't have to force transformation. When your standard changes, the new results become automatic. You no longer have to fight for discipline. You are simply living at a level where the old excuses don't fit anymore. You're no longer trying to break your limits. You've moved the line entirely. You want a new life. Change what you demand from yourself. Change what you refuse to tolerate. Change what you consider normal, because the moment your standard changes, your life begins to catch up. The standard you live by is the thermostat of your life. It sets the temperature, and no matter how high or low things go temporarily, you will always return to that setting. You can have a breakthrough, you can have a big win, but if your internal thermostat hasn't changed, if your standards haven't risen, you will sabotage your progress and return to your old normal. That's why people win the lottery and lose everything. That's why people get in shape and gain it back. That's why people build something powerful, only to let it collapse because the outer result changed, but the inner standard didn't. Their identity didn't grow with their achievement, so they slid right back into the level they were used to. You can't outperform your standards for long. You can rise above them temporarily with effort, with hype, with a burst of motivation, but eventually you will drift back down. Not because you're not capable, but because you're not wired to stay there. Your identity hasn't adapted to the new level. Your beliefs haven't caught up. Your standards haven't recalibrated. And this is the invisible trap that keeps people stuck. They improve just enough to taste more, but not enough to sustain it. They raise their output, but not their standard, and so they crash. And when they crash, they doubt themselves. They tell themselves, maybe I'm not built for this, maybe I don't have what it takes. But the truth is, they do have what it takes. They just never locked in the new level to lock it in. You have to upgrade how you see yourself. You have to decide that the way you used to live is no longer acceptable. The way you used to operate, the shortcuts, the inconsistency, the excuse, that's not who you are anymore. You draw a line and you say, that version of me is gone, not someday now. And this is not just about goals. This is not about doing something impressive. This is about identity. Because when your standard changes, your actions change. When your identity shifts, your behavior follows. You don't have to force it. It becomes automatic. It becomes normal. Because now you've raised the floor of your life, not just the ceiling. Think about that. Most people focus on raising the ceiling. They want to know, how high can I go? But they never ask the more important question, how low am I willing to sink? That's what determines your life. Not your peak, but your average. Not your potential, but your baseline. If your baseline is chaos, struggle, distraction, inconsistency, you can have moments of greatness, but they won't last. You'll always fall back to your baseline. You'll always collapse under the weight of what you built because you never raised your standard to support the life you were chasing. But when your standard is excellence, when your baseline is high performance, when your identity is built on follow-through, when your habits reflect consistency, you don't fall back. You don't lose progress. You don't need to rely on willpower. You simply live at a different level, and people will ask you, how do you stay so consistent? How do you keep showing up? How do you get so much done? And the answer is simple. It's who I am now. Not what I try to do, not what I force myself to become, but what I've decided to expect from myself every single day. So, how do you change your standard? It starts with a moment of truth, a moment where you look at your life not with judgment, not with guilt, but with honesty. You look at your patterns, you look at your behavior, you look at what you've been tolerating, and you ask, is this who I really want to be? Most people never ask that question. They stay in motion. They stay busy. They keep repeating the same patterns without stopping to reflect. And because of that, they never confront their current standard. They never challenge it. They never upgrade it. But if you do, if you take a moment to ask that question honestly, you will feel it. You'll feel the gap between who you are and who you could be, and that feeling, that discomfort, that's not something to avoid. That's your invitation. That's your call to rise. That's your inner voice saying, you are made for more. And the next step is decision. You make a new decision about who you are. You say, from this moment forward, I no longer tolerate inconsistency. I no longer accept mediocrity. I no longer live at the level of my past. I raise the bar. I raise the floor. I raise me. And once you decide, you act, not next week, not when you feel ready, now. Because action is what makes the new standard. Real action is what rewires your identity. Action is what proves to your brain that something has changed. And here's the thing, your brain needs that proof. You can talk all day long about how serious you are, how committed you are, how this time is different, but until you take action that aligns with the new standard, your brain won't believe you, and it will keep pulling you back to the old pattern. So you give it new evidence. You do something you would have avoided before. You follow through when the old version of you would have quit. You execute with clarity and purpose, not because it's easy, but because you've decided that's your new normal. And every time you do that, you reinforce the shift. You tell your nervous system, this is who we are. Now, you tell your subconscious, this is what we do. And the more you do that, the more natural it becomes, the more effortless it feels, not because life got easier, but because you got stronger. Raising your standards is not a one-time decision. It is not something you do once and never revisit. It is something you recommit to every single day, because life will test your new standard. It will test your resolve. It will throw distractions, temptations, and challenges in your path to see if you really meant what you said. And this is where most people fall. They raise their standard for a moment, they get inspired, they make a declaration, but the first time life pushes back, they drop right back into old patterns. They let one bad day become a bad week. They let one slip up turn into a backslide, not because they are weak, but because they didn't build a system around their new standard. Because a new standard is only as strong as the structure that supports it. You cannot rely on motivation. You cannot rely on emotion. You need a system, a structure, habits, accountability, rituals that remind you of who you are and what you stand for. If you say you're done tolerating inconsistency, but you don't create a daily routine that supports consistency, your standard will break under pressure. If you say you're raising the bar on your health, but your kitchen is full of junk food and your schedule has no space for exercise, the old habits will win. So you build around your new identity. You create an environment that reinforces your new standard. You remove the triggers that feed your old patterns. You design your space, your calendar, your habits in a way that makes your new standard easy to live up to. And that includes the people you surround yourself with, because your standards will rise or fall to the level of your circle. You cannot expect to raise your life while staying surrounded by people who are content with the bare minimum. People who constantly complain, people who make excuses, people who normalize quitting. You don't need people who challenge your value. You need people who challenge your standards. People who remind you of your potential. People who hold you accountable to your best self. People who don't let you settle for less than what you're capable of. And if you don't have that kind of circle yet, you become that person for yourself. You become your own coach, your own challenger, your own accountability. You set the tone for your environment, because the moment you raise your standard, your circle will start to shift. Either the people around you will rise with you or they will fall away, and that's part of the process. Growth is not just about addition, it's about subtraction. It's about letting go of the habits, the mindsets, and sometimes the relationships that no longer serve the new version of you. That's not cruelty, that's clarity, that's commitment. And as you build this new standard into your life, you'll face internal resistance. The voice in your head will try to pull you back. It will tell you, who do you think you are? It will say, you've never done this before. It will whisper, you're not ready, it's too late, you don't have what it takes. That voice is not truth. It's your old standard fighting for survival, because every time you level up, your subconscious resists. It wants to keep you safe, it wants to keep you comfortable, it wants to keep you familiar, but growth is not familiar, growth is not comfortable, and safety has never produced greatness. So you train your mind to recognize that voice not as truth, but as signal. A signal that you're on the edge of a breakthrough, a signal that you are stretching beyond your previous limits, a signal that you're right where you need to be. And then you take action anyway, because that is how you silence that voice, not by arguing with it, not by reasoning with it, but by moving through it. By showing yourself that you are no longer governed by the fear of failure, the fear of judgment, the fear of discomfort. Every time you act in alignment with your new standard, you weaken that old voice. You rewire your identity, you reinforce your new normal, you give yourself evidence that you are no longer the person you used to be. And as that evidence stacks up, your confidence grows, Not the kind of confidence that's loud and flashy, but the kind of quiet confidence that comes from integrity, from knowing that you are who you say you are, from trusting yourself to follow through. Because real confidence doesn't come from words. It comes from action. It comes from alignment. It comes from knowing that your behavior reflects your standard. And that kind of confidence is unshakable because it's not dependent on results. It's not dependent on validation. It's rooted in who you've become. And that's the real reward of raising your standard. Yes, your results will improve. Yes, your habits will get stronger. Yes, your life will start to shift. But the deepest reward is what happens inside you. The person you become when you stop settling. The person you become when you stop making excuses. The person you become when you decide that nothing less than your best is acceptable. Once you've raised your standards, built structure around them, and started reinforcing them through action, there's another layer that begins to reveal itself, and that layer is the resistance between where you are and where you want to be. Because raising your standard doesn't eliminate the gap, it illuminates it. It shows you how far you still have to go, and that truth can be uncomfortable. But that discomfort is a gift, it's clarity. It's showing you the space between your potential and your performance, the space between your talk and your walk, the space between who you are and who you're capable of becoming. That space is not a punishment. It's an invitation. And when you lean into that space, when you stop avoiding the truth, when you stop pretending, when you stop hiding from your own reflection, something powerful happens. You begin to reclaim your power. Because the moment you stop lying to yourself, you stop weakening yourself. Most people don't fail because of circumstances. They fail because of self-deception. They tell themselves they're doing their best when they're not. They convince themselves they're committed when they're not. They blame things outside of themselves to avoid confronting what's going on inside themselves. But high performers, people who live with extraordinary standards, they don't play that game. They are brutally honest with themselves. Not to tear themselves down, but to build something real, something solid, something that lasts, because truth is the foundation of transformation. So you start calling yourself out, not with judgment, but with ownership. You start noticing where you're slipping. You catch the moments where your standard starts to bend, and you don't rationalize it, you don't explain it away. You hold the line. And in that process, you develop a trait that most people never develop, self-respect. Because when you raise your standard and actually live by it, something shifts inside of you. You begin to trust yourself. You begin to believe in yourself, not because of external praise, but because you know deep down that you are in alignment with your highest self. And self-respect leads to power, because when you respect yourself, you stop needing validation from others. You stop lowering your standard to make other people comfortable. You stop apologizing for wanting more, for doing more, for becoming more, and you realize something. You've been carrying power this entire time. It wasn't outside of you. It wasn't waiting to be found. It was waiting to be activated. And the key that unlocks it, standards. What you demand from yourself, what you expect from yourself, what you refuse to tolerate from yourself. And when you start living at that level consistently, your world starts to reflect it. Your relationships change because people treat you how you treat yourself. And when you start honoring your word, following through, and living with clarity, you attract people who do the same. You no longer tolerate one-sided relationships. You no longer accept disrespect. You no longer chase people who don't show up, because your new standard creates a new filter. And anything that doesn't match that standard simply doesn't make it into your life. Your environment changes. You stop spending time in places that drain you. You stop feeding your mind with garbage. You start designing your life to support your growth, not because someone told you to, but because you've decided that your environment will match. Your evolution, your time becomes sacred. You no longer waste hours on distractions. You no longer say yes to things that don't align with your mission. You begin to see your time not just as minutes on a clock, but as the fuel of your future. And once you see it that way, you protect it with everything you've got and your habits. They stop being things you have to do and become things you get to do. Because now you're not doing them to escape pain or impress others. You're doing them because that's who you are. Now, the person who shows up, the person who follows through, the person who leads themselves, and here's the most powerful part, when you start living with higher standards, you begin to influence others without even trying. People watch you. They notice, they feel your energy. And without preaching, without forcing, without needing recognition, you begin to raise the standard. In every room you walk into, you become a leader, not because you have a title, but because your life speaks for itself. Your consistency, your clarity, your conviction, they say more than words ever could. And people either rise with you or they move out of your way. But that leadership, it starts with self-leadership, because no one will follow someone who cannot lead themselves. And that leadership is not about being perfect. It's about being committed. It's about falling and getting up. It's about owning your growth and refusing to make excuses. So when things get hard, and they will, you don't collapse. You don't lower your standard to match your circumstances. You raise your effort to match your standard. You rise, you adapt, you persist, not because it's easy, but because you've decided that quitting is no longer on the table. When you live with high standards, life doesn't get easier, it gets clearer. You start to see what you were blind to before. You start noticing what you used to tolerate. You become aware of how much time you used to waste, how many excuses you used to make, how often you gave away your power for comfort, convenience, or approval. And that awareness is sharp. At first, it can sting, because now you're seeing all the ways you held yourself back. You're seeing your own patterns with brutal honesty, not because you want to beat yourself up, but because truth always precedes growth. And if you want to go to the next level, you have to be willing to confront what's real, not the story you've told yourself. Not the filtered version, but the truth. Where have I been cutting corners? Where have I been lying to myself? Where have I been choosing ease over excellence? Because if you don't confront it, you can't correct it. You can't change what you won't own. And most people are stuck, not because they're incapable, but because they keep running from the truth. They think avoidance will protect them, but avoidance is the very thing keeping them stuck. Your standard is forged in the fire of those hard conversations with yourself in the quiet moments when no one's watching. When there's no applause, no reward. Just you and your decisions. Just you and the standard you've chosen to live by. And the people who live at the highest level, they do not negotiate with their standard. They do not need an audience to show up. They do not need praise to stay disciplined. Their reward is internal. It's the pride that comes from knowing they're doing the work, whether anyone sees it or not. And that kind of pride, that kind of quiet self-respect is priceless. It doesn't fade. It doesn't depend on anyone else. It stays with you. It grows inside of you, and over time, it becomes your strength. It becomes your fuel. But it only comes when you raise the bar and refuse to lower it again. When you stop adjusting your standard to your mood. When you stop measuring your commitment by how you feel and start measuring it by what you said you'd do. Because every time you follow through, you reinforce that standard. Every time you keep your word, you send a message to yourself. We're not going back. Every time you do what needs to be done, especially when you don't want to, you anchor in the new identity. And over time, that identity becomes automatic. What used to feel hard becomes natural. What used to be a struggle becomes a habit. What used to require effort becomes effortless, because repetition creates identity. Repetition makes it real, but repetition requires patience. And this is where most people fall short. They expect immediate results. They want change to be fast, and when it's not, they assume it's not working. They think something is wrong, but nothing is wrong. Change is happening. It's just happening internally before it shows up externally. And if you can trust that process, if you can keep showing up, keep doing the work, keep honoring the standard, even when the results are invisible, you will get to a point where the results can't be denied. You will get to a place where the growth is obvious, where people start asking what changed, but by then it won't even feel like a transformation, because to you it will just be normal, it will be who you are. You won't feel like you're trying anymore. You'll just be living at a higher level because you built it one action at a time, one decision at a time, one standard at a time. And here's the truth no one wants to admit. Most people already know what they need to do. They don't need more information. They don't need a perfect plan. They don't need someone to hold their hand. What they need is a higher standard. Because once your standard rises, you'll find a way. You'll become resourceful. You'll get creative. You'll stay up later. You'll get up earlier. You'll remove distractions. You'll stop wasting time. You'll figure things out not because it's easy, but because your new standard won't let you accept anything less. That's the power of raising your standard. It activates your potential. It forces you to evolve. It brings out qualities you didn't know you had, and it does something even more powerful. It eliminates options. When your standard is excellence, quitting is no longer on the menu. When your standard is growth, staying stuck is no longer an option. When your standard is integrity, excuses lose their power. And that kind of clarity changes everything, because now you're no longer making decisions based on how you feel. You're making decisions based on who you are. And when your decisions are aligned with your identity, your new elevated identity, you become unstoppable. You've always had the power to change your life. It was never about what you lacked. It was never about waiting for the right moment, or getting the perfect conditions, or finding someone to give you permission. It was about deciding once and for all that the standards you've lived by up until now are no longer acceptable. Everything you want begins with that decision, that moment of clarity where you draw a line in the sand and say, this is where it changes. This is who I become now. This is the new level I hold myself to from this day forward, because no change lasts unless it's supported by a new standard. No breakthrough sustains itself without a new baseline. No transformation becomes permanent until your identity, your discipline, your behavior, and your expectations are all aligned, and you don't get there through willpower alone. You get there by raising your minimum, by shifting what you call acceptable, by refusing to return to the level that once felt normal to you, by elevating the floor, not just the ceiling. You already know this. When your standard is low, you can have moments of greatness, but they won't last the moment. Life throws pressure. The moment fatigue hits, the moment motivation fades, you'll fall back to your default. That's what most people call failure. But it's not failure, it's a return to standard. So change the standard, raise the level, redefine what's normal, build a structure around it, anchor your actions to it, surround yourself with people who match it, speak to yourself in alignment with it, and do not waver, especially when it's hard, because that's when your new identity is being tested. That's when your new life is taking shape. Not when things are easy, but when your environment pushes against your new standard and you push back harder. The rewards for living this way are not just external. Yes, your results will change. Yes, people will notice. Yes, opportunities will come, but the real reward is who you become. Someone who doesn't shrink, someone who doesn't settle, someone who follows through not for the world, but for yourself. That kind of self-respect cannot be bought. That kind of self-trust cannot be faked. It is earned, one action at a time, one decision at a time, one moment where you choose to rise instead of retreat. So from this day forward, check yourself. Not once, not occasionally, but every day ask, does this decision match my standard? Does this behavior reflect who I am becoming? Am I honoring what I said I'd do, or am I slipping back into comfort? And when you find yourself slipping, and you will, you correct it. You don't quit, you don't spiral, you don't shame yourself, you reset. You reinforce the line. You remind yourself that this is a new life now. This is not about perfection, it's about progress. It's about refusing to negotiate with your old self. It's about raising your standards so high that the only version of you that survives is the one who leads, executes, delivers, and dominates. Because when that version of you becomes your normal, everything in your life changes to reflect it. Your health, your relationships, your finances, your influence, your peace, it all rises to meet the new you.